How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we are back at it breaking down the latest in Mets land. And a player that we talked about plenty this offseason is Vladdy Guerrero Jr. And the big question has been with Vladdy, what is his future going to be? Is he going to stay in Toronto, or is he going to be leaving? Well, folks, everything is now aligned for Vladdy Guerrero Jr. to not be a Toronto Blue Jay beyond the 2025 season. So let's get into his latest remarks, where things stand between himself and the Toronto Blue Jays, and how everything has now paved the way for Steve Cohen and this Mets team to pounce should they wish. We will hear from Steve Cohen himself today, who just spoke to the media at the time of recording this and was asked on the Vladdy Guerrero Jr. front, so we'll hear from him along with other key comments that he shared with the media today. Thank you guys so much for smashing that like and subscribe button as your first chime in. It's greatly appreciated. It's also appreciated for you guys to hear from our amazing sponsor at BetUS, which has you covered with all your sports betting needs. Head over to betus.com.pa today and use Wardy's promo code YouTube150. That way YouTube get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, $125 on your second and your third, up to $2,000 for whatever you guys want to bet on. And folks, I have a simple straight bet here for this Thursday's matchup in the Four Nations hockey games. Team USA versus Team Canada. USA took game 1 3-1 or so. I'm taking USA for obvious reasons here. As talented as Team Canada is, led by Connor McDavid himself, I'm taking the Tkachuk brothers. I'm taking my guy Kreids and Trocheck from my Rangers, and I apologize to my Islander and Devil fan friends I may have offended there. I know we got Jack Hughes on the squad and many others, but I have to be rooting for my Team USA, Team America here. So we're hammering this. This is a $50 bet that will hopefully double up should they in fact win in this gold game against Team Canada. It's going to be an absolute electric factory of a game, and I cannot wait to see what transpires with that one. Good luck to anyone that tails this bet, but please know I'm not a sports betting expert, just a diehard fan that loves to place daily bets here, whether it's on hockey, baseball, football, soccer, you name it, we have you covered here on the platform on WardyNYM. But now, folks, let's reel back into this and let's get into where all this news initially stems from today. And that comes courtesy of Vladdy Guerrero Jr. himself. Now, funny enough, I debated on recording this video last night, knowing that the Vladdy Guerrero Jr. extension deadline was midnight yesterday, but I halted because people in the media were saying that Vladdy may not have a decision until sometime tomorrow. Well, come to find out, today is now tomorrow from yesterday, and now Vladdy Guerrero Jr. has in fact made his decision. Let's hear.
Vladdy, were you and the Blue Jays able to make a deal on a contract extension?
El equipo y tú pudieron llegar a un acuerdo en la extensión.
Bueno, no, ninguno de los dos llegamos a un acuerdo, ¿sabes? Ellos estaban en un punto y yo estaba en otro, pero obviamente son cosas que pasan y uno tiene que entender el negocio.
No, we did not get an agreement today. I mean, they had their numbers, I have my numbers, but you know, this is business, like I always say. Things happen, but we all good.
Were you guys able to meet in person in the days or hours leading up to your deadline?
Pudieron reunirse en persona, especialmente los últimos días cercanos al deadline.
Sí, los últimos días sí, obviamente ellos y mi abogado estaban haciendo los negocios, obviamente, pero no llegó nada al punto.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially the last couple of days, the front office, my lawyers, my agents, they met. They tried, both parties tried, but I mean, obviously we couldn't get an agreement.
They did not negotiate beyond 10:30 p.m. or so as of last night, from all the reports indicated. And furthermore, Vladdy, when asked on, were things at all ever close to the negotiations, and he flat out said no. Then also, when talking about his future, he did make note that obviously he wants to be a Blue Jay, but now it's going to be up to the Blue Jays competing with 29 other teams that are looking for his services. So Vladdy is very confident, a lot of teams liking the idea of signing him, and he knows very well, especially after Juan Soto inked the contract that he inked this past offseason, that there was never a realm where Vladdy was not going to hit the free agent market unless they gave him an extension he simply couldn't refuse. If it was at anything at all in favor of the organization over the player, Vladdy was never going to accept it, which is exactly why Blue Jays and their fans were doomed from the start when he put this deadline in for the beginning of spring training, because as we know, it's not going to happen. And then you see guys like Ross Atkins and Shapiro go out of their way to talk, and I think this is hilarious. Mark Shapiro shares what he thinks on the Blue Jays negotiation with Vladdy. We couldn't align on a common number. A lot of progress was made. I mean, can you just see the comment ratio, in case you guys can't tell, in Sportsnet, 77 likes to roughly 120 comments at the moment. So to give you an idea as to where Blue Jays fans feel right now, they're not happy, they're disgruntled. And then you have Ross Atkins Americans going out of the way saying, obviously, we're very disappointed. We worked very hard. The motivation is still there. And they did go on to say that they offered Vladdy what would have been the largest contract in team history. But let's bear in mind the context of that contract right now as a 6-year, $150 million deal. So the largest contract in Blue Jays history doesn't necessarily at all align with what he wants in the free agent market next offseason, which is exactly what leads us to the conversation that we're going to have right here, right now. Because, guys, we talked more on the hypothetical front in the early goings of the offseason that if the Mets don't bring back Vladdy Guerrero Jr., and I would like to emphasize that down below, I know the graphic has the age wrong. Vladdy is at the young age of 25, and he'll be hitting the free agent market next offseason at the young age of 26. Ignore it saying 28 down there, because when I made this graphic, I forgot to change the age from the previous player that was there that I think was Alex Verdugo, who has yet to still sign with a team separately from this conversation of Vladdy Guerrero Jr., put up 30 home runs, 103 RBIs at 323, 396, 544 clip for a roughly 6 WAR season for Vladdy, who slimmed down greatly. He looks really good in camp early going, and he wants reps at both first base and third base to not only increase his value once he hits the free agent market, but also show his versatility as a player and a guy who prides himself on playing more than just the first base position. A 165 WRC plus, which simply means he's 65% better than the average batter in baseball. Yeah, Vladdy's kind of good. He's kind of really good. So much so that that's exactly why you're going to have at least 10 plus teams going out of their way to try to acquire him this upcoming offseason. And if Vladdy doesn't all get any consistent playing time at third base this season, that'll further up the ante with a lot of teams having interest, because the more positions that Vladdy shows that he can at least be able to handle in, whether it's first base, DH, and now third base for a significant period of time, or at least a solid sample size, that'll only increase the suitors for Vladdy, and he's very aware of that. He's cognizant. And after seeing fellow Dominican players like Juan Soto get the bag he got this past offseason as a 26-year-old, Vladdy now going to hit the free agent market at the young age of 26, he knows he's looking for the bag. He's looking to rewrite the market for first baseman, slash if he's going to be a third baseman as well, and understandably so. So, guys, this is far from a surprise. We have said this on the platform for the past 2 months. There was never a chance that Vladdy was going to get extended. The fact that we have Blue Jays fans in the comments in my chat saying otherwise just shows you that they are still dealing with the copium, which is the reality that you have an ownership and a front office that simply does not want to do what's best for the organization. If they did, they would not have dismantled that offense 3 years ago and have not built this team properly ever since then. And I will firmly stand by that. Jim at Ballcap Sports, my guys at Blue Jays today, they feel very similar, and for obvious reasons. And now that Vladdy is a slam dunk to hit the free agent market and not be traded, assuming that the Blue Jays do not trade him for a king's ransom at the deadline, that's where a team like the Mets come into play. Because not only did the Mets call and show preliminary interest at least in Vladdy via trade this offseason, if they were at least considering it, should they say not bring in Alonso, but with Alonso only on a 1-year guarantee at $30 million with that 2026 opt-out, Alonso's always opting out, even if he has an underwhelming year. The likelihood of him opting in for that 2026 deal is slim to none, just based on the fact that he can still probably get more on a shorter-term contract elsewhere after this upcoming season. So pair that with Vladdy hitting the free agent market and all the other stars that'll be available into the market, we have reached a great reality that, okay, if Vladdy Guerrero Jr. has interest in the Mets are going to have beyond interest in him. They've already shown that to a degree, and this vibe, this wave of the Los Mets that's been going on with Dominican, Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, Nicaraguan, Colombian, Cuban, you name it, all these different type of Spanish players, that is only continuing the vibes upward in Flushing, Queens, with not only the clubhouse culture, but also the on-field product. We saw guys earlier today that I'm going to show you before we wrap up the show, Jose Siri chopping it up there with Alvarez, Soto, and others, and there is something about not only having Spanish players, but ones that are really feeding off of each other, and it's usually an electric factor, right? It reminds me a lot of the World Baseball Classic when I think of Lindor's 3 home runs going toe-to-toe with Stan and the Subway Series, and he got fans jumping, pouncing on the Mets dugout with the Puerto Rican flags. That's what I want to see in more regular season games for the Mets this year and the years going forward. Not only because the vibes are electric, but because the on-field product, the baseball itself, will be beyond entertaining. And this is no slight at all on Alonso, but when evaluating Alonso and Vladdy, who makes more sense long-term, Vladdy is a guy that is an exception to still go out of your way and consider more of a longer-term base for a contract. Is it a slam dunk to happen? No. But now is there properly a path for Vladdy Guerrero Jr. to land in Flushing, Queens, to pair with his buddies and Juan Soto and others with this Mets squad for 2026 and beyond? Yes, and that path is more clear and more possible than ever before. So Mets fans, my great question to each and every one of you is, how likely, unlikely is it that you think the Mets will go out of their way to roll out the red carpet for Vladdy Guerrero Jr. the way that they have for other players? Because I know the rightful counter right away will be Wardy. It's easier said than done to bring in multiple guys on large contracts, and I understand that, and that's exactly why I'm not sitting here today telling you with certainty that's going to happen. But it's certainly a possibility, and a greater one now more than ever. And if you can bring in a guy like Vladdy, the Mets will now have a core that is sustainable both short and long term for an extended number of years. And for Steve Cohen, who prides himself on wanting to win not one but multiple championships over the next decade, this is a type of move that certainly helps push and move the needle to help get you there. And if you're going to have, again, the Japanese Dodgers, then you might as well have the Spanish Mets here and have them go toe-to-toe in this year's and upcoming years as NLCSs for years to come. But guys, let's see some key remarks that we actually got from our guy, our owner, and Steve Cohen today, because Steve talked about the prospect of Vladdy as well, and apologies for the audio running there for a second. Steve talked about the prospect of Vladdy as well as other things in Mets land when speaking to the media at Port St. Lucie today.
Turn down the extension for the Blue Jays, and he'll be available next off season.
Yeah, he's a great ball player, and you know, once again, I'll worry about that next year. You know, obviously with payroll considerations, and you really can't have. I mean, you can't have too many long-term contracts because then you lose your roster flexibility. So you got to be really careful. But I'll let my baseball people make that decision.
I think it's notable that Steve went out of his way that, yes, we're aware of the Vladdy situation, and yes, we also know that's, again, easier said than done. It's not overly sustainable to have multiple guys on long-term deals. And he's 1,000% correct, which is why, in the end, if the Mets don't land Vladdy, and that is, say, the difference maker for them, that they really don't want to commit 10 years to a guy who, mind you, 10 years from now will only be 36, but they just don't want to do it because maybe they don't like how Vladdy's going to profile, given the fact that he's more of a first baseman than anything else. I can respect that, even if I humbly disagree and maybe still want the player and say he lands with the Boston Red Sox, or he goes back to Toronto, or he goes somewhere else. As long as it's not the as long as it's not the Dodgers, we're going to be okay, or anyone else in the National League East. But I think it's also notable that, you know, how things are perceived right now is not how they're going to be perceived once in active negotiation. This is the same Steve Cohen who said how exhausted he was with Alonso negotiations. Then he's up hitting Alonso and Boris's line 48 hours after the fact. It's all a negotiation tactic, and for the Mets, they have to make sure that they don't give any leverage away, obviously. They know that Vladdy is going to be interested in Steve Cohen's billions of dollars that he has, that he can, you know, comfortably spend, at least to a degree, in the millions front. Not so much in the billions, but more so in the millions. And for Steve, very aware of the fact that Vladdy is going to be another, not necessarily a generational player, but certainly a very high-quality player. I wouldn't lump him in the same class as Juan Soto, obviously, but you can lump him in the same class as Juan Soto when evaluating age, and I think to a degree an upside. I mean, Vladdy has done a lot. He's already had a north of 50 home run season in a year where Shohei still won it all in the MVP out of the American League. Now a 30 home run campaign this past year, but a more poised and more composed hitter that you could probably argue that he's ever been in his career before, everybody. When we look at the Fangraphs numbers here for Vladdy, we're looking at a 323 average, a 396 on base percentage, of 544 slug. Fantastic. Last season, 26 home runs, 94 RBIs, a 264 average, a 345 on base, and a 444 slug for a 118 WRC plus. So just for context, folks, that's pretty much, you know, right around a 40+% differential and how much better of a batter he was above league average in 2024 than he was in 2023. The year before that, a 32 home run and 97 RBI season with a 132 WRC plus. In 2021, the 48 home runs, 111 RBIs that we talked about, kind of like that anomaly year, similar to Alonso's breakout in 2019, surpassing Judge with the home run record for rookies. I don't expect Vladdy to hit 48 home runs again, but I think there's also something that really needs to be noted here, is that Vladdy Guerrero Jr. just had his second best season of his career, you could rightfully argue, this past year, when he was in the worst lineup that he's ever been a part of with Toronto to this point. There's no denying that the Blue Jays have moved at best lateral with their organization and at most downward since the 2021 season, when their offense was an absolute huge focal point of everything in Major League Baseball, but their pitching just couldn't help them at all. They didn't make enough moves, and at the young age of 22, Vladdy had 48 home runs that year. That's with guys like Marcus Semien, Bo Bichette, you know, in the early goings of peaking in his young career. Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., I mean, Danny Jansen, Alejandro Kirk, even though I don't think Kirk fully broke out then. The list goes on. I mean, you had, again, the first year of George Springer as well when he was still solid. That was a very strong offensive team. Marcus Semien, if I didn't mention him already. Since then, they have fallen from grace in the depth around Vladdy. This will help by bringing Anthony Santander this year for them, but not doing too much outside. That is still going to hurt them. So for Vladdy to put up the numbers I did this past season, while knowing that he was without question the best, far and away the best player in their lineup, tells you all you need to know on not only how pitchers approached him, but just how tremendous he was with his eye at the plate and locking into the best of his abilities. Now, I did want to show one more thing on the Vladdy front, and then we'll get into some more comments on Cohen and a little bit of a takeaway from Port St. Lucie. We'll probably have more content out, folks, later on today in a separate video or live show. More than likely a video between the two, but just be on the lookout for it if anything. But Vladdy Guerrero Jr.'s baseball savant numbers this past year speak for themselves. 98th percentile in batting run value, 98th in xWOBA, 100th in expected batting average, 98th in expected slugging, 98th in average exit velocity, 91st in barrel percentage, 97th in hard hit percentage, 95th in bat speed, 62nd in sweet spot, 74th in squared up percentage, above league average in chase percentage, 68th in whip percentage, 93rd in K percentage, walk percentage in the 76th percentile, horrendous in his outs above average, but tremendous arm strength in the 78th percentile, notable if he shifts and gets more reps at third base this year, and sprint speed, 45th percentile, guys. The guy was basically league average in sprint speed for a guy that people call Tubby, just like Alonso. Oh, he's an overweight first baseman. Not the case. Vladdy's slimming down. He's looking younger. And a walk year for Vladdy, I will not be shocked if he actually gets in the 40-plus home run campaign with Santander batting right beside him. This is going to be a massive year for Guerrero to prove himself to the league further, to look for his bag, and that's where the Mets are going to come into play, along with the Boston Red Sox, as some of the top suitors for Vladdy Guerrero Jr. The Yankees will try, but Vladdy's on record multiple times saying how much he despises the Yankees organization, that even in death, he would never play for them. So unless money really does change that discussion, we'll worry about that next offseason. I'll see it to believe it. Now, more remarks here from Steve Cohen that I want to share with you guys today. Let's get rid of the Vladdy graphic. And you, again, guys, please let me know your key takeaways on Vladdy down below. I would love him. I think Vladdy makes endless sense long-term for the Mets over Alonso. But I can also see how if Alonso does have a great year with Soto, and he's going to get that home run record, and if everything kind of goes smoothly, then I'm not opposed to keeping Pete. But that's where you kind of reach then the discussion. Okay, we're going to keep Pete, but still on the short-term basis, could the Mets dabble for Vladdy? Obviously, it's really hard to envision having both on the roster. Just one feels like it'll be more than enough, and the reality of it happening. But just some food for thought for each and every one of you when we look at Alonso, because this is a big year for him in a lot of ways to prove himself to be a Met for the second half of his career, or if this is potentially his last year in Queens again, like what we dealt with this past year. So a lot of uncertainty on the Alonso front. Same thing with Vladdy, but one thing is certain, they're both going to more than likely hit the free agent market now, right? They're pretty much a certainty to do that. I thought this was interesting. Steve Cohen, when asked about the attendance last year, had this to say.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Okay, that really bothered me.
Me too, Steve. But the difference, Steve, is that I'm the one that's doing a 2 to 2.5 hour hike to a game that lives out of state and has to deal with all the fees that come with it as well. Even though that obviously I'm doing it for not just fan attendance reasons, but work reasons too, as I cover the Mets for a living. There's something to be said about the prices that I'm sure factor into things quite a bit, that I'm sure Steve knows too. Easier for him to kind of have his opinions as well when he's a $22 billion man versus Joe Schmo like myself. But furthermore, let's hear Steve's remarks here because I think they're important.
18th in attendance when we're right in the middle of a pennant race. I've said this before. The series against the Nationals, right before the final Philly series, I think there were 18,000 fans in the stadium during a great pennant race. And so I'm really hopeful this year. I mean, I'm told that usually attendance lags performance. And so I'm really looking forward to this year being a year when the fans come out. I think the fans are having a great time. I mean, when I look out on the stadium, I think it's a great game presentation. We have a great team, I think. I'm really excited I think it's going to be a fun place to be this year.
I think it's going to be a fun place to be this year, too. And I think Juan Soto is going to be the easiest factor to help with the attendance right away, because you're going to have bandwagon fans come in. Yes, Mets fans, you heard that correctly. We're going to have people actually jumping on our bandwagon for a change, and not things usually being vice versa, where you're like, all right, my team's out of the playoffs now, I'll root for this team, or all right, I'm going to defer to this sport now. No, not so much the case. Us Mets fans are locked in for what's going to be an electric 2025. Attendance, we hope to be better, but let's also not forget having an abysmal start to the year last year really goes in hand with people not wanting to go out of their way to the games. Because one, a lot of fans are reluctant to go to games beyond the first week of the season after opening day and all that hype because it's cold. It's not the best weather usually in spring at Citi Field. It's usually very windy and mixed with rain. It's just not fun. Then as you get into the summer, it really is until we kind of get to the halfway mark of the summer, around All-Star break, and then pushing closer to the trade deadlines, when you see Mets fans really start to show out more, because a lot of fans didn't want to buy into the team even when they had a great June, because they were still so far behind on their chances to be in early playoff contention at that point in the halfway mark of the season. So the lack of ability to be at anywhere close to a playoff spot for a significant period of time, even with all the winning the Mets did last year, also goes in hand with the lack of attendance.
Spending down to a more reasonable level when you start to use the farm system in the ways that you want. What is a reasonable level?
I mean, I'd like to get below the Cohen tax, or, whatever. I'm sure it's about me. 'Cause, I mean, there's a lot of Cohens out there. I mean, I was saying to somebody before, I'm a piker now compared to the Dodgers.
I love that. Steve was asked further on, his stance on spending. He said, listen, heading into this offseason, I had a number in mind that I was comfortable with, and we fully blew past that, like we have previously. And, it comes down to the reality that I have to continue to remind myself that players are expensive. Free agency will always be more expensive than I initially anticipated to be, which is why Juan Soto is still starstruck on his $765 million contract, for example. But I think it's notable that, Steve is really looking at the tax here and saying, hey, we would like to get under it, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to be going out of our way to do if it's going to at all hinder for the development of the team and what we're trying to build for 2025, 2026, and beyond. But obviously goes without saying that if you have a number of years where you have significant losses, say what the Mets did, over like $250+ million in losses we saw this past year, it's not sustainable over an extended period of time. But again, with Soto's arrival and with the vibe shift officially changing in New York baseball now, thanks to Soto, I think we're going to quickly see his return on investment in Steve. And for a guy that was never looking for a proper ROI when he first bought the Mets for the billions of dollars, I think that too will make him happy. And final clip I want to show you guys from earlier was Mr. Jose Siri chopping up and laughing with the boys there. They seem to be having a good time. I don't know who Jose Siri was talking about here, but Albie's laughing it up. Soto right there. Remember when people thought, remember when people thought that Soto, Siri were going to have beef? Yeah. just pay attention, guys. Baseball's baseball. That was never going to happen. And they're going to, I guarantee, have an absolute blast together this year. Tyrone Taylor's just trying to sneak into, hey, I can be part of the group, Los Mets, let's do this. But all jokes aside, guys, that's going to do it for the clip. Be on the lookout for more Mets content that may drop later today. If not, folks, I will see you all in the next one, whatever it may be. So have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. This is your guy, Wardy, signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.